Hey everybody, it's Hicks. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me today. I want to be chatting with you about why it is that we end up engaging in limiting behaviors. And I want to help illuminate for you the real cause of every limiting behavior and limiting belief that you've been holding on to throughout your entire life. Because honestly, the question I get very frequently from clients and people at events and individuals speaking with me online is, Ty, I want to lose more weight. How do I do that? Or I want to quit smoking. How do I do that? Or I've been depressed for a very long time. How do I get out of that? Or I've been dealing with chronic anxiety for a very long period of time. How do I handle that? So what I find is that people are generally looking to change one of two things. They're looking to change either a behavior that they're exhibiting in their life, or they're trying to change how they feel. They're trying to change, whether they are perpetually feeling angry all the time, and they want to feel more joyful or exhilarated or passionate or curious or whatever the case is. So very often it becomes an emotional goal that they have, or they have a behavioral goal that they have. And so, let me just ask you, what's an area of your life that you would want to improve? And think, does it fall into one of those two categories? It almost assuredly will. So I want to share with you what the real thing is that holds us back in both of these areas, our behaviors and the emotions that we get to experience. And it's an answer that you may not have expected, because we kind of have a culture that prides itself on handling solutions ourselves and figuring out what the new strategy is and implementing the best tactic to be able to deal with an issue. And by the way, I've got nothing against strategy that can help save you a ton of time, etc. But the problem is when we get down to the nitty-gritty of what actually limits us in terms of human behavior, we have to understand that it goes beyond just having the right strategy. What's happening here when we're experiencing these limiting behaviors is a phenomenon almost as if we're living life with the accelerator down and the e-brake on at the exact same time. I'm sure you felt like that recently. And what's happening here is that we're experiencing a limitation from the subconscious mind, not the conscious mind. And what I mean here, just so we're using the same terms, the conscious mind is the part of the mind that you hear speaking, right? It's the part of your mind that you use to reason, that has the reasoning faculty, where you weigh decisions, where you talk to yourself, right? That's the conscious mind. The things that you are readily aware of and that you're, directing your focus towards. That's the conscious mind. The unconscious mind or subconscious mind is the part of your brain that actually dictates the vast majority of your behaviors, and also does the most work in terms of determining what type of emotions you are going to feel on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, let's say that you have a particular pattern of when you're stressed out, you snap at people and you just become malicious and you get angry, and that's what happens for you. Well, that's your subconscious mind. It's not that your conscious mind is saying, I'm so angry at them and I really think that being angry is really going to help me in this situation, and so I'm going to choose to be angry at this person. No, it's just you sort of become angry. And so this is why personal transformation feels so elusive very often. People wonder, how in the world can I actually become a master of this situation if I'm always feeling stuck? And this is why people feel stuck, by the way, because you live in your conscious mind. That's the part of your mind where you're aware of what's happening, you're directing your attention, you're choosing things, you're making decisions, right? That's the part of your mind that more or less you have control over. The subconscious mind, it does not feel like you have control over. It very much feels like it has control over you. And it becomes this inescapable cycle where you start engaging in these behaviors. You don't know why you're engaged in the behavior. You know it's not good for you, but you engage in it anyway. And the more you engage in it, the more predisposed your subconscious makes you to engage in that behavior again when you're approached by a certain similar set of circumstances. So I like to use this metaphor to explain the inner workings of the mind, and hopefully it serves you. But one way you can think of the mind is like a jukebox. And if you think of a jukebox, what happens with a jukebox is you type in a particular sequence of numbers and letters. And when you type in that particular sequence, the jukebox brings forward a particular disc associated with that sequence. And the disc you could think of as a pattern, like a psychological pattern. And so what happens is when that particular sequence of numbers and letters is inserted, then your mind brings forward the readily associated pattern that it has linked to that stimulus, and it runs that pattern automatically. So your pattern may be, when my daughter doesn't clean up her room, I get angry and yell at her. Or your pattern could be, when my husband tries to, come on to me, I push him away. Or your pattern may be, as soon as somebody says anything remotely questionable about my body image, I spiral into depression, right? So there's all sorts of different psychological patterns that limit us. Another one could be, you get stressed at work, you go out, you have a cigarette, okay? So all of these patterns become interwoven into our subconscious mind and become a part of the fabric, the very fabric by which we live our lives. And so it feels, therefore, like these patterns are actually a part of who we are. In a sense they are, but they're not equivalent to you. What I mean by that is the temporary limiting patterns that you've been exhibiting up to this point are not equivalent to you. You're greater than that. Your identity is separate from the current limiting patterns you're exhibiting. So how do you get out of this situation? How do you actually take control of your subconscious mind? Is it actually possible? Well, it is. You can actually rewire your subconscious mind, both literally and figuratively, right? You can change the pathways, the neural pathways in your brain, so that instead of having dirt roads to places called exhilaration and excitement and curiosity, and super highways to places called anxiety, depression, overwhelm, stress, maliciousness, right? You can reverse that trend. You can actually shift your emotional center of gravity. You can make it so that what is your default emotional state is a much higher level of a resourceful emotion than it is an unresourceful emotion. Because, by the time people enter my office and they're looking for help, they've already dealt with years and years and years of stacking unconscious conditioning where they now have deeply ingrained patterns of depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, whatever you want to call it, alcoholism, substance abuse, and I've got to help them understand how to reverse those patterns. And the way we do that, if we're going back to the metaphor of the jukebox, is I help them understand how to, first of all, identify which patterns are holding them back. Remember the e-brake on the gas pedal example. I help them pinpoint what those patterns are. I help them pull them out. And I help them by giving them a little nail that they can use to scratch that pattern up. And what happens is when you scratch that pattern up enough, it'll never play again. It'll actually get spit out because the jukebox will necessarily choose a new, more resourceful pattern that will actually get you closer to where you want to go. So once you actually interrupt the pattern effectively and you're trained in the art and science of how to make that happen, you never have to live in fear ever again. You can go from an experience of reacting to life to designing an extraordinary life. Once you actually understand the quote-unquote user's manual for the brain, you know how it works. You know how the patterns are installed. You know how you adopt them over time, and you understand how you can take conscious control of them. Now, by the way, this is very often the part in the conversation where people say, Ty, I don't want to program myself. I'm not a robot. I'm a human being. I want to feel things. And I say, well, of course, I'm not saying that you become a robot. What I'm trying to point out to you, however, is that you being programmed is not an option. You've already been programmed. The difference is that you have collected your programs over the years subconsciously. You have not actively chosen them. For instance, you might have had a previous romantic partner that never cleaned up after themselves. And so after you broke it off with them and you're engaged with a new romantic partner, you're about to get married, anytime that they leave a mess around, you start to freak out, right? Because you've got this old pattern that has been ingrained in your mind that anytime there's a mess, it equals disrespect, and you're getting disrespected, and therefore you can't handle it. So that's just a isolated incidence of one particular pattern. So any of those can be shifted. And the problem that you've got to become aware of is the fact that you've already been programmed. It's just that you haven't chosen the programming that you've been given. So I'm not necessarily the guy that's here to give you, make you a robot. I'm actually helping you become less of a robot, because a robot is somebody who engages in life automatically running on scripts that they did not write. That's a robot. And that's probably how you've been living your life up to this point. So if you want to not become a robot, if you actually want to engage in the creative, constructive, exciting process of becoming a person, meaning that you become an ever-changing, ever-growing, ever-expanding process, as opposed to a single definitive event that defines you for the rest of your life, then you have to understand how these processes work. And if you want to live a life of real joy, gratitude, no matter what happens, if you want to make sure that your self-worthiness is not on the table for negotiation when you're engaged in life's arenas of challenge, then there's no choice except you actually have to learn what these skills are. So this is why it almost appears miraculous when clients go through my programs and I help them actually remove themselves from substance abuse. I help them actually understand the root causes of their anxiety and their depression and turn them around in a couple of weeks. I help them understand exactly why it is that they're acting the way that they're acting, they're feeling the way that they're feeling. And over the course of pretty much 2 months maximum, I can show them how through some very simple 5 to 10 minute daily strategies, they can shift their emotional home to wherever they want. They can make sure that whatever habits they want to be ingrained in their daily lifestyle are put there and that they become automatic, so that you don't have to constantly be using up all your willpower to try to change your life. Changing your life does not have to be a gruesome, grueling, sweat-inducing process, okay? It often is up front when you've got all this bad conditioning that's been surfacing for so long and stacking on top of itself, and you now have to learn how to reverse that. But once you actually understand the principles, it becomes super easy. It actually becomes fun. And it means that you can actually create any sort of habit that you want. You don't have to struggle with life. You can choose how you want life to be, and you can take control of what's happening in your subconscious mind so that it starts directing you exactly where you want to go. And this is what I call living in alignment, where you don't feel like there's parts of you that are at war with each other. You feel like everything is congruently aligned. You feel like how you want to live your life and how you actually are living your life are one and the same. You feel that you're perpetually, constantly just making progress towards a worthwhile goal. You're not experiencing life with all this friction. You've let go of the emergency brake, in other words. You're not caught up in all of these old patterns and expending unneeded psychological and spiritual energy spinning in circles, but instead you're moving in a straight line to where it is that you want to go. That is the exciting, exhilarating part of life, and that's when you start to wake up to the actual reality of how many possibilities there actually are for you. So it's an incredibly exhilarating experience. It requires a little work, but you learn how to do it. But I want you to understand, if you're looking for the source of your issues, it's the subconscious mind. And that's an area that very unlikely you're familiar with, that you know how to navigate, that you understand the pitfalls of, that you understand how to consciously control. So if you want to learn how to make that an actual reality, I encourage you to reach out to us. Schedule a time on the link with this post or this page so that you can speak with one of my team members and myself, and you can start to learn how to make that happen for you and how to turn things around. You can actually figure out how to transform your whole life in a matter of a couple of weeks or months. It sounds like hyperbole. It sounds like something that doesn't seem reachable, but people do it. People make it happen every single day when they actually get access to the real strategies that are needed. So I encourage you, reach out to us, make us put our heart where our mouths are. I would love to make sure that you understand exactly how it is that you can turn this thing around. Go ahead, click the link, go ahead, schedule a call with us, and I look so forward to speaking with you again soon. Take care.